Hi everyone. So tonight I thought it would be a good time to talk about working with the sacred masculine in our spiritual practice and what that can look like for us. So for many of us, this can be a difficult journey stepping into working with masculine energy as a positive spiritual experience instead of perhaps the negative spiritual experience that we've been either raised with or come into contact with either in general in our society or through personal religious spiritual experience. So that's basically a lot of mumbo jumbo to say that there's a lot of wounding around the sacred masculine in our collective conscious and unconscious experience in the West. So for many of us, when we really start to dive into a more personal spiritual practice, in a lot of ways we start either with an asexual type of energy such as Great Spirit or Source, and then we might start to look at working with the sacred feminine and bringing in that kind of energy that can be in fire and anger and rage, right? Like if we're working with Sekhmet, but who can also be very nurturing and mothering and supportive. For instance, if we're working with Demeter or Isis energy in the sacred feminine. And so these places are very positive places for us to interact with the sacred feminine and also integrate the sacred feminine within ourselves and heal the large societal wounds in regards to the sacred feminine that we all hold within ourselves. So whether you identify as male, female, gender fluid, all of us carry within ourselves both the masculine and the feminine and also the divine or source perspective as well. So when we are working with the sacred feminine, we're really doing a lot to heal those wounds that we hold collectively as a society and as a race of humans, and also personally. So we're working at a few different levels there because we're healing our personal wounds in regards to the sacred feminine, healing and integrating that. And in reality, we're working with archetypes and mythology to do that when we're working with deity. So when we bring in an energy like Isis or Kali, if we're working with the destroying aspect of the feminine, we're really working with an archetype to heal a wound within ourselves and to empower a part of ourselves that perhaps we've lost sight of or that we have banished into the darkness due to fear of rejection or fear of power. So many of us come to the sacred feminine first, and then we start to see within ourselves and our spiritual path maybe a need or a call to bring in the sacred masculine. And so when I say that we then start to feel a call to or called by the sacred masculine to work with them, I do mean this for both those who identify as male and female in physical form. So it's important for us to understand that both male and female, or those who identify as gender fluid, can work with either sex of deity. And really for a balanced spiritual practice, many of us find that the masculine and the feminine do start to want to integrate and work together on our spiritual path. And so in previous videos in these series, I've talked about the way that deity tends to show up for me and how I've brought them into to a working part of my path, and also the way that they show up for others. So for clients or just people in general that I work with, deity does show up and have things to say and conversations and journeys to take with each of us. That being said, there are many ways of looking at archetypes and deity as an archetype, as a myth. When we start interacting with that energy, it's larger than us, and yet at the same time we are source, so it's also a part of us. So I would offer that it's important when you start working with the sacred masculine to be grounded and comfortable in your own skin enough to be able to meet the deity that's showing up to work with you in openness and trust, and not get into a fear space in connecting with them. And again, with these many layers, we're also talking about looking at the deity as deity, but also understanding that it is an archetype that your psyche is working with. So by that I mean you can choose to look at them as actual physical beings. Well, they're not necessarily in physical form, but actual energetic beings, or archetypes that our higher self is choosing to call into our experience so that we can really interact with a piece of our higher self that's taking on a different form through myth to share lessons with us and to encourage us on our path. You can choose where you line up with that. And guess what? You can choose to believe both of those things or none of those things. This is your path. You're in charge of it. And you're in charge of your experience on your path as well. So you are really being encouraged to hold yourself accountable for your experience in the spiritual realm. You're in the driver's seat. No one else is in charge of your experience. And we can share our stories and our journeys, but at the end of the day, you're in charge of your spiritual experience. So when we start to interact with the sacred masculine, it can be an invocation. So you can choose to call the deity to you. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, some different ways that you might choose to do that. Or you can have the experience of deity actually coming and speaking to you. And so I wanted to kind of like jumpstart again the Sacred Masculine series by talking about kind of my personal experience working with the Sacred Masculine and what that has been. And so I'm going to talk about a few specific deities male deity that have appeared to me over the years, and how I've worked with them, just to give you an idea of ways that you can connect with them, and also kind of an understanding of what it's like when the sacred masculine shows up and how to work with it in a way where you feel empowered, especially if you've had in some ways experiences with the more Christian idea of God that's been perhaps caused serious wounding for you. And as someone who's experienced that in my personal life, I'm beyond thrilled to tell you that you can get to a space where you can work with the sacred masculine in a really empowered way and start to heal those wounds within yourself that many of us in Western culture have developed in regards to the sacred masculine and working with male energy as divine. That being said, my own personal spiritual practice is still mainly sacred feminine focused, but I do have some key gods who are regularly on the roster and who show up and who work with me a great deal. And I gotta turn the other way, I forget. Jim Morrison of the Doors, who you can see in the background, is one of those deity that shows up and works with me. I have, yes, elevated Jim Morrison to deity level in my personal practice. So when we talk about invoking deity and what that looks like, invoking is a calling in of an energy and asking for an energy to connect with you and to work with you. And there are several reasons that you might choose to do this. So you might feel called to ask an energy like the Green Man to come in and work with you because you're working on opening up to abundance in all ways. Perhaps you're opening up to working with the element of earth in your personal practice, and so you want to start interacting with that energy. And perhaps you feel like the Green Man really appeals to you. Maybe you've been drawn to do some research on the Green Man, connect with his energy, and so then you decide that you'd like to call him into your practice and ask him to appear. Now remember that you're in charge of your spiritual practice, so you can actually do this. And also, depending on what you're choosing to believe about deity, and remember, you have choices, calling him in is in some ways calling in an aspect of higher self for some of us. So when you set a very clear intention, you can trust that that energy will come and work with you, right? Because in reality, for some of us, it's an extension of self. It's an exploration of an aspect of self through myth and archetype. For those of us who choose to work with deity as an individual energy that we're connecting with, you might find that calling deity in involves a little more trust. But as long as your intentions are true and you are grounded in your practice and clear about what it is that you're calling in, the interchange and exchange that you're going to have when that deity decides to appear will be exactly as it should be. So that being said, just like when we work with the sacred feminine, it's very important to understand that the experience that we have with deity is not always warm and fuzzy. It's not always soft. There are times when we might be provoked by a deity, and also kind of have some of our buttons pushed. As long as we stay, again, grounded and stay in a space where we can trust and we feel safe, and we check in and make sure this is an energy that we want to stay connected to, there is a power to exploring the provocation. So, for instance, when I work with Papa Legba, who's the god of the crossroads, we don't have a warm and fuzzy relationship, and so when he shows up, it's usually to kind of call me out on my shit and help me to look at some stuff that I probably don't want to look at, and do some real soul work and some real shadow work in front of that altar. So when I talk to Papa Legba, when he shows up for me personally, not when he shows up for clients, but when he shows up for me personally, it's not always with a hug and a hi, how are you? It's usually a what the heck are you doing? And let's get real here, girly. So it's important to know that those kind of exchanges aren't bad. They're actually very helpful. And I do find that with some of the masculine male deity that show up to work with me, we have a little bit more of a get real type of exchange. Although Kali and Sekhmet are just as get real as Papa Legba, to be honest with you. So this kind of goes across the board if you're new to working with deity of either gender or of gender fluid, who identify as gender fluid. So for instance, Kuan Yin is a deity that started as male and she became female through the myths. So this is a goddess that I would actually consider gender fluid in some ways, or asexual, and so you can work with in both the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine aspect. Pause. Okay, so I went off track there a little bit. Invoking, that's what we're talking about. So invoking can involve, again, doing research, looking into the myth of the deity that you're wanting to call in. So again, to go back to the green man, perhaps if you like to work with altars and sacred tools, you might create an altar just for the green man. So bringing in sacred tools or stones or crystals or aspects of nature that you feel represent the green man. And then stepping into ritual. Now, ritual isn't something scary. It's a completely personal practice, and so ritual will look like whatever you would like it to look like. So creating that altar space or some type of sacred space that feels good for you, calling in that energy. For instance, we'll go with the green man here again, calling in the energy of the green man, setting an intention for what it is that you'd like to work with him on in your life. So again, if this is about abundance or connecting more with the element of earth, or understanding sexuality and sensuality as being just as spiritual as meditation or any other type of spiritual practice we would typically think of as something sacred, right? Being able to look at the profane as sacred. So if you're a tarot junkie like me and you want to work with the green man or Kununos or Pan or that type of energy, the devil from the tarot deck is an awesome card to have on your altar or in your sacred space, right? Because the ultimate message with the devil is you're learning how to look at the profane as sacred, equally as sacred as what we look at as spiritual to be sacred. So maybe you have the devil on the altar. And then sitting and meditating in that sacred space after setting a clear intention and asking the deity to manifest with you is typically very effective for me. Now, depending on who you get, if you have a trickster deity who's showing up, right? So if you're working with Grandfather Sky, perhaps, he might not show up the first time you ask him to be present in the circle, in the sacred space, in front of or on that altar, in that sacred area that you've created to connect with him. If you don't find him the first time, if he doesn't find you, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you have to work a little bit to establish that connection. Be very clear with yourself about how deep your wounds are with the sacred masculine. I ran away from working with the sacred masculine for years and years and years and years. Even with the powerful experiences I had with the questioning God, which I've talked about in other videos, as a young child. The sacred masculine just did not feel safe to me. It didn't feel like a space where I would be unconditionally loved and supported, and so I literally ran away from it. And it really took Odin kind of calling me in and not allowing me to avoid him, that allowed me to start healing my relationship with the sacred masculine. That's a lifelong journey for me. For many of us who've had very painful experiences in childhood in relation to the sacred masculine, it will be a lifelong relationship that you're bringing into healing and balance. The beautiful thing is that you absolutely can do it. And I can tell you, over the last 6 or 8 months, my relationship with the sacred masculine has drastically changed me and changed my life. So it is absolutely worth the investment of your time and energy to connect with and bring into balance and integration the sacred masculine within your life. Got off track again, sorry guys. So invocation is one way in which we can interact with deity. Again, be patient with the process. It's not necessarily a quick fix. Putting a set of antlers on the altar and asking Cernunnos or the Green Man to come in isn't necessarily going to mean that he shows up that night. He might want you to meditate for a little while and to sit with why you actually want him to come in, and then start a conversation with you. So the other thing that can happen is that you can be called by a deity, or deity can come to you. This, in my experience, doesn't always happen as much as invocation for many people. If you are someone that the gods talk to, then, or someone who works with deity, works with archetype, works with mythology, in your personal practice, then you might find that this happens. And when deity shows up, I can assure you that there's no question that they've come in to talk to you. So you won't be wondering, hey, was that deity that came and talked to me? You'll know who it is. You might not have a name for them right away. That might come later, depending on how well acquainted you are with your mythology or your archetypes, but you're going to know when deity shows up. And they will typically have either a very clear message, have one of many clear conversations with you, or they may let you know that they are a deity that will be working with you for the rest of your life. So you may have that experience as well. When this happens, and they can come in and show up for you at any time. So like Odin couldn't really get to me at the altar for a long time because I was so barricaded against the sacred masculine. So he had to kind of come in through a session with another person and say, hey, we gotta talk. You gotta meet me at the tree here at this time, and we're gonna do this, and it's gonna go down. So be ready. And from that point on, I had started a really powerful journey with working with him. But it took time for us to build our relationship and to build our trust, especially because I was in such a closed off space to the sacred masculine. It took years for us to get to the place where we are in our relationship now. So, and I use the term relationship because with some deity, especially those who really work with us as guides, or some people like to use the word angel, you might choose guardian angel. I prefer to say spirit guide. So if, like for instance for me, Odin, who is a core spirit guide for me, we have built a relationship over years of working together. So Odin works with me all the time. It's not just in front of the altar. It's not just when I sit down and light the candle and burn the sage and walk the wheel and then sit in the space and meditate, right? Odin doesn't just show up then. Odin walks with me all the time. He's really never not there. So we have built a relationship working together. And this is the opportunity and the blessing that you have to work with deity if you choose to include this in your practice. Because if you are open to building a relationship with them, whether you choose to believe that they're an aspect of you, higher self, manifesting as a deity to work with you, or if you choose to believe they're actual separate energetic being, and they are deity coming to talk to you, of which you are a part, right? Either way, building a relationship is a huge gift because it allows you to get really, really powerfully in touch with your intuition, really powerfully in touch with your gifts, and start to understand what it's like to be in contact with higher self. And so through keeping that connection open and growing that muscle, opening that connection ever more as time is going by, the relationship actually does become a very real, clear, powerful, strong relationship. when deity shows up to you, there will be no doubt that it's deity. You might have to do some research to figure out what pantheon you're working in, what myth you're pulling up, what archetype you're connecting with, but you will know it's deity. And so it will be a matter of doing research. If you're working with a teacher or something like that, you might choose to ask them, but really allow yourself to be self-guided in the understanding of the deity that's working for you, working with you. So for me, in my case, because I'm very comfortable with myth, I've been working with myth for years and years. Joseph Campbell's works in my early 20s were profoundly affected my life. I knew it was Odin right away because I had an understanding of the myth of Odin and the archetype of Odin and what he looked like. So I'm just going to show you this image. So those of you who work with me or who are friends know that when I talk about Odin, I affectionately call him the All-Father, which is one of his names, and I also love to call him the Big Mac Daddy because he's a big deal in my book. So this is my favorite image to date in a deck of the Big Mac Daddy. Odin is everything. What else can I say to you? He's everything, right? His myth is very important, and in tarot you will see his myth in part portrayed in the Hanged Man. So Odin's energy is pervasive and powerful, and we find him hidden in a lot of traditional religious or esoteric symbolism as well. Lost track of where I was because we're talking about Odin and I got a little sidetracked. So you might find that you need to do research. Please trust your intuition about who the god is, okay? And if you're really unclear, ask them to help you out. Ask them for signs. One of the most powerful ways that I've found in working with deity is just asking them for clarity and asking for signs when I'm unsure. I ask for signs. I ask that the signs be clear and that I have really powerful understanding of what the sign means for me, and I've never been disappointed. The signs are always very, very clear. So the more that you build the relationship, the more powerful the energy is in working with the sacred masculine. Same goes for the sacred feminine. Same goes for gender fluid archetypes. That being said, give yourself time to build the relationship. So give yourself time to actually spend time, energy, and space with them, to connect with them, to talk with them, to ask them questions, to meditate with them, to journal with them, to walk with them. Going out and walking with them, super powerful. And I mean actually walking the earth with them, being in nature, getting out, asking for signs, talking to them while you're with them. It's all about developing a language and a relationship. And I do really mean that. I mean, it's like falling in love with someone or dating someone. You want to spend time with them, you invest the time and energy to spend time with them. And so in the same working with deity, at least for me in my experience, it's very important to make that time to connect with them. The beautiful thing is that as you do this, there are core guides that are going to stay with you, right? There are a plethora of other deity that will start showing up, teach you a lesson, hang out with you a little bit, maybe make you laugh, and then go. And they might come back later on, then they might go again. So you're going to have really powerful relationship with deity the more that you open up to this. And so in this video, I just really want to help you feel more comfortable connecting with the sacred masculine, because it is something that's very scary, or at the very least uncomfortable for many of us who choose to walk a self-guided spiritual path, which you may have come to my channel for that, or a pagan spiritual path, which that may have brought you here as well. If you work with tarot, and that's what's brought you to my channel. Working with deity is working with archetypes, is every single card in your tarot deck. So understanding deity, understanding archetypes, that's just going to make you a more powerful, empowered, and inspired card reader. So I would encourage you to sit with connecting with deity through the cards as well. So there's invoking, there's deity showing up and connecting with you, and then you can also work with deity through tarot cards and through some oracle decks. I know some of you are going to ask me this, so I'm just going to say this right now instead of trying to remember to post something in the info bar below, because we know that I suck at that, guys. Decks to work with male deity, I would encourage you to explore The Gods and Titans Oracle by Stacey DeMarco and Jimmy Manton. Some really nice introductions to really popular gods in across many different pantheons. The artwork is also beautiful. Again, this image of Odin is from the Gods and Titans Oracle. And so it's a powerful way to start to grow a connection with deity through actual images in a deck. Besides that, it's a little tricky actually to find decks that have the sacred masculine as equally portrayed as the sacred feminine. So we can see where the imbalance has shifted from the monomyth of one god, Christian, religious, very, very black and white energy, completely cutting off the sacred feminine, to now we're in this space where, for some of us, especially those of us who find a self-guided spiritual path or a pagan spiritual path, those of us who identify as witches, etc., where it's so much about the sacred feminine that we've in some ways cut off the sacred masculine. So the integration is important. Both sides being represented equally, both sides being honored, integrated then into the core, the whole, the Great Spirit. So it's difficult to find a lot of decks that equally represent the sacred masculine as well as the sacred feminine. I would encourage you to look at the Mary L. Tarot if you're looking for a tarot deck that gives you a really nice, like juicy masculine energy. So you can find spread out in that deck the sacred feminine and also the sacred masculine in really beautiful ways. The Fallen Angels Oracle has a representation of male deity in shadow. And I would also say that the Hermetic Tarot, the Thoth Tarot, have a masculine feel to them. So they might be decks that you choose to kind of call into your spiritual practice as a way to start connecting with the sacred masculine. It's very important that you feel empowered and protected on your path. So you will know when the time's right to start calling in the sacred masculine and to kind of give the assent to the universe that, yes, I'm ready to call in and integrate this energy. Do not push yourself. It's good to be provoked, but don't push yourself into a space of true fear and your spiritual practice. That's not going to serve you. So allow yourself to actually be really ready to call in the sacred masculine. Maybe a little bit scared, but like 70% ready, right? Not overwhelmingly afraid. Grounded, but ready to have your buttons pushed a little bit. Connecting with the sacred masculine is going to allow the sacred feminine to be really supported in a very active way within your own being. So I would say that through working with Odin, I've come into a more empowered space in my life. Through working with energies like the questioning god, Cernunnos, Pans, Odin, Papa Legba, these types of energies, there is it becomes more comfortable for me to start being very active in my spiritual expression. And so that has really, really served me in my path, getting more and more comfortable with expression of truth, being comfortable in my own skin, not needing others' approval, not needing to, and it's interesting because in some ways the sacred masculine can really, when it's out of balance, can really shut down around boxes and roles and ways of being, that we have to accept certain assigned roles and that's it. And yet I found personally for myself on my path, connecting with the sacred masculine has allowed me to break out of those boxes, to let go of those roles, and to really look at who I am underneath all of that and what it is that I actually want to experience in my life. As a healer, but also as a human who's come here to learn powerful lessons. So I would say that the sacred masculine is very, very beautifully supportive of the sacred masculine, of the sacred feminine. Sorry, the sacred masculine beautifully supportive of the sacred feminine in a very active way, in a way that is protective and loving, not protective and shutting down, but protecting and nurturing and loving when it's in balance. There's also this energy with the masculine, and we find it in the sacred feminine as well with deity like Lilith and Hecate of the questioning. And this is always very, very important for me on my path, and I encourage people who choose to work with me to ask questions as well. So the questioning God, so this energy that we would identify as dark. So if we're looking at the Christian mythology, not looking at the evil religious aspect of Satan, I want to be very clear about that here. I'm talking about the energy in the myth, the Christian mythology of the questioning God. If we look in the book of Job, we will find this, okay? This energy of the questioning God. So the sacred masculine is going to encourage you, just like Lilith and Hecate, if you're not quite yet ready to work with the sacred masculine. They're going to encourage you to ask questions, to pull things apart, and to get down to the core. So where's the core wound? How are we walling off and shutting off heart and authentic living within our own being? So you will find that this aspect of questioning beliefs, questioning truths, getting down into things, looking at the aspects of self that we tend to avoid, and looking at aspects of society that we tend to avoid, and really being very clear about what's actually going on and how to open up to integration and truth within that for ourselves. And those things are very powerful, and those things are life changers if we allow them to be. So, I've talked for quite some time, and I think I will end this here before I overwhelm you all. But be looking in the future over the next few months for videos on individual gods. But as far as ways of starting to connect with the sacred masculine, if you're feeling called to do this in your spiritual practice, I really want to encourage you to look at invoking as well as relationship with deity. Kind of marry the two of these. Allow the connection with that deity, once established, to be a really powerful part of your spiritual practice. Inviting them in meditation, having conversations, having a relationship with the deity, really connecting with them, letting that intuitive muscle grow so that it gets really clear for yourself what the messages are that you're being given, because they're here to help you and to assist you in opening up on your own path, right? However you choose to look at them, whether they're an aspect of higher self or an actual energetic being. Both of these energies, all of these energies combined, are here to help you on your path. So the clearer you can get about communication, the better off you are. And for most of these deities that I've found over the years, consciously choosing to make a committed effort to connect with them is only going to serve you and serve your path as well. So if you have questions about the sacred masculine and connecting with the sacred masculine, leave me a comment below and I'll add it to the list to talk about in video form. It's been wonderful to spend time with you, and I just want to say really quickly a special thank you to the sacred masculine that have come to work with me, especially in the last few years. Big, huge thank you and heart love to the All-Father and the Big Mac Daddy. And also to the sacred feminine as well for holding a space and lighting a candle, that lighting a flame, right, that allowed me to open up to this. So it was through the healing, real heart healing that happened with the sacred feminine in regards to the wounding of the sacred masculine that's allowed me to come into a balanced relationship with the sacred masculine again. So beginning to be balanced. So if you are in that space on your journey where you're wondering, are you ever going to get there? Or maybe you are having a really visceral reaction to this video, like, oh my God, I could never work with the sacred masculine again. Are you kidding me? I will never feel safe enough to work with the sacred masculine. Allow yourself to kind of breathe into what's coming up there, because there's a wound there that's rising to the surface that's ready to be healed. And when and if the time is right, connecting with the sacred masculine can be a really beautiful part of your spiritual practice. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. Much love, many blessings, and I'll see you in the next video.